Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is November 23rd and we have a packed episode ahead. So in this episode, a strike on the Moscow power bridge. Drones have reached the capital of the Russian Federation. Lukashenko has released Ukrainian teenagers from prison. Why was he holding them there? We'll cover this story. It's a very complicated one. Yakutia, the diamond capital of Russia, has run out of money for contract soldiers. How sanctions are directly stalling Putin's new army, and it turns out Russia is training Maduro's security forces in Venezuela. The very general who commanded and gave the order to blow up the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant in Ukraine is now training Maduro's security forces. Russian celebrities have been banned from entering Europe, and in response they've threatened to return in tanks. And how did the European Union rise up against Trump's plan? 3 key amendments to this plan will be discussed today. All this and more in today's episode. There's a lot of interesting stuff coming up. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. Subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. In response to the ongoing strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, Ukrainian drones attacked elements of Moscow's energy ring, both last night and this morning. Russian social media channels reported that drones attacked a thermal power plant in the town of Shatura, Moscow region. Well, this is about the idea that winter will be cold, as Donald Trump said. Maybe it will be cold, but winters in Russia are even colder, and now Ukrainian drones are reaching there too. Not just drones, but missiles as well. So, to make sure winter doesn't seem too mild for Russians, Ukrainian drones, they started quite a fire at this Shatura power plant. Let's watch this video. And as I already mentioned, Ukrainian drones have one good tradition: to come back and finish off the target if they didn't destroy it the first time. Here's a video shot this morning. Once again, drones visited this power plant. This power plant is one of the major sources of generation in the Moscow energy zone, supplying power through various high-voltage lines. In other words, it's part of a large ring that supplies the eastern sector of the Moscow region, which is already connected to Moscow itself. This isn't a key capital hub like Cherpovets or CHP-27 or Kashirskaya power plant, but it's still a blow to the Moscow power ring. By the way, on his Telegram channel, the local governor of the Moscow region reported that some of the drones were destroyed, while several crashed onto the station's grounds. You saw, right, how they crashed onto the station's grounds? Every time they come up with new wording. Sometimes it's that debris fell or that a fire broke out. I remember one of the governors said that debris from the falling debris caused dry grass to catch fire, and then the dry grass caught fire. Then it was some dry tree, and so on and so forth, until the whole facility burned down. By the way, I remember after the explosion at an important military chemical plant in Russia, when the explosives production workshop was just blown to bits, the local authorities reported that everything was fine. There were no casualties. Well, maybe they're right in their logic. No workshop, no casualties. But what's important is that Ukraine has shown that it can reach energy hubs near Moscow with drones and has shattered the myth of the capital's impenetrable air defense. One after another, those drones kept hitting that power plant. Now they'll have to redistribute air defense systems again, but where are they supposed to get them from? Surely not from Moscow, right? So maybe the winter will be cold. The only question is, for whom? Maybe Muscovites don't care at all. Maybe for them, the world beyond the MK just doesn't exist. But they need to understand that it's those regions that provide them with heat and electricity. That's exactly where it all comes from. Yesterday, an important event took place. Ukrainian citizens returned home to Ukraine from prisons in Belarus. 31 Ukrainian citizens. They were met, among others, by the GUR and personally by Kirilo Budanov. Let's watch how it happened, and then I'll tell you a story. But pay attention to the ages of these prisoners. The girl in the first frames is Maria Misiuk. She was arrested when she was 16 years old. She spent 2 years in Belarusian prisons. She was accused of supporting Ukraine, of trying to break the law. Initially, it was a protest group of young people. They were painting graffiti. But then something strange happened. That is, Maria Misiuk is Ukrainian by origin. According to her passport, she moved to Belarus with her parents in 2022. And she was arrested by the Belarusian security services and accused that this group of young people was preparing some kind of sabotage against Belarusian law enforcement or the Russian army. It's not even clear which. They quickly cobbled together a propaganda film in Belarus called Children in the Crosshairs, Recruited by the Enemy. This film was broadcast on the ONT TV channel. And Maria is one of 7 teenagers who were detained for allegedly cooperating with Ukrainian intelligence services. She supposedly created an anarchist cell called Black Nightingales. You see how things can turn out. At the same time, there is no evidence at all that she participated in any organizations. Do you know how many years the Lukashenko regime gave her for these organizations? 13 years. So if she hadn't been released now, she would have spent another 11 years in Belarusian prisons. I came across an analysis of this propaganda film in which experts point out that most likely it was actually the KGB that created the channels, contacted teenagers, provoked them, and tried to extract information from them. Do you want to help Ukraine? So what are you willing to do? And so on. In other words, it was the Belarusian KGB officers who did this to identify protest-minded teenagers. And under the guise of some Ukrainian patriots or intelligence services, they tried not even to recruit, but simply to draw out this protest sentiment from the teenagers. And then they documented everything and handed out these monstrous sentences to them. In 2020, Lukashenko was very afraid of the youth. The youth really scared him when a large number of Belarusians, mostly young people, took to the streets. They protested against the rigging of the elections. Remember how a terrified Lukashenko was running around in a bulletproof vest that didn't even fit him and with a Kalashnikov without a magazine. After that, they started tightening the screws and basically destroying the entire opposition. So they started making these films and began demonstratively imprisoning young people. And to make an example, they decided to jail 16-year-olds. And if necessary, they'd even jail 14-year-olds. At that time, an acquaintance of mine got caught up in this meat grinder in Belarus. He spent quite a long time in a detention center cell. When I first met him in Kiev, I simply didn't recognize him at all. I mean, he looked just like a ghost, pale, distant, and almost unrecognizable, as if he was only a shadow of his former self. And he told me that they kept him in a cell where you couldn't sit or stand properly. The light was on all the time. Music played constantly, so it was impossible to sleep. So whenever Lukashenko pretends to be an old sick pensioner or a dim-witted collective farmer, we must always remember what he has done all these years, how he physically destroyed the opposition and dissenters, and even put children in prison. Well, for everyone who was released, it's a great joy. I share in the happiness of the families who welcomed their loved ones after all this. From Belarusian prisons, and of course we thank the US Embassy which took a direct part in this. Friends, let me remind you that we are currently raising funds for our military. We have several fundraisers going on right now, but I try to alternate between them somehow. We want to help everyone, our military. And this fundraiser... Yesterday there was a small problem with the sound, unfortunately. Maybe someone didn't hear the message. I share the stories of those who reach out to us. And this is the story of a girl named Dasha. She is 23 years old. Maybe I shouldn't have said girl. Well, about the warrior Dasha, that's a more accurate way to put it. Dasha worked in public television, filming stories about safety. She and her film crew often came under enemy fire, filming interviews with soldiers. And at some point she felt that she wasn't as useful in civilian life. She joined the 26th Separate Artillery Brigade on May 9th of this year. She completed training in the 3rd Separate Assault Brigade, and now Dasha is a service member of the 26th Separate Artillery Brigade. Both Daria and her fellow soldiers recorded an address to us. Let's help them. Listen to this message.
Вітаємо! Ми бійці 26-ї окремої артилерійської бригади імені генерал-хорунжого Романа Дашкевича. Напередодні підрозділи дивізіону артилерійської розвідки нашої бригади втратили звукометричні комплекси Барак-2. Для нас це не просто техніка. Барак-2 виявляє роботу великокаліберного кулемета на відстані до 12 кілометрів, а мінометів і артилерії до 30. Це дає можливість точно відстежити вогневі позиції противника, швидко реагувати і, найголовніше, рятувати життя наших побратимів. Без цих звукометричних комплексів наша розвідка втрачає критичну перевагу над ворогом. Ми просимо вашої допомоги, щоб якнайшвидше придбати нові Барак-2 і повернути нашим воїнам інструмент, який рятує життя і підвищує ефективність оборони. Кожен донат – це вклад у безпеку на передовій і в життя ваших чоловіків, синів, дружин, які стоять на захисті нашої країни. Дякуємо за вашу підтримку і небайдужість. Разом ми сильніші. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
These are the kinds of warriors in the 26th Separate Artillery Brigade. Right now, they're stationed at one of the hottest spots on the Pokrovsk direction, and this Barak 2 acoustic detection system is absolutely essential for them. I think you understand that perfectly well. Let's help them out. There's a link to the fundraiser in the description of this video. There are monobank, private bank, and PayPal options for those who want to help from abroad. As always, I want to say a huge thank you to each and every one of you, both from myself personally and from our defenders. You are a great force, and together we can achieve a lot. So let's help our defenders. And as usual, we talk about good people, about such strong, steely individuals who defend Ukraine, but unfortunately there are others in this world as well. And now, a little about them. Germany has denied entry to a Z Patriot and Putin's representative. The actor Sukhorukov now promises to come to Germany in a tank. So this actor, a Putin supporter, Sukhorukov, was denied a Schengen visa in Germany. He talked about this in an interview, and it turns out the German side cited two reasons why Sukhorukov cannot come. The first point, one or more states believe that he poses a threat to their international relations. The second point, he may be dangerous to public order or internal security. In general, everyone who supports Putin should be refused a Schengen visa with reference to these points. And this Sukhorukov, saying that he's now been labeled an international terrorist, started threatening that in that case he'll come in a tank. Where are you going, and what tank are you going to come in? He is an active supporter of Putin, a devotee of this criminal war. He has repeatedly supported Russian aggression, calling Putin a historic, most powerful and unique figure of our time. And he said that just for the Crimean Bridge alone, Putin deserves to be painted on an icon. Putin can be painted on an icon. So go paint in Sizran, sit there and stop wandering around in Schengen countries or whatever. Go paint Putin, I don't know, somewhere in Perm on an icon. So why did he go to that disgusting West where non-traditional values and all sorts of other horrors are happening? Turns out he was planning to spend Christmas in Germany. You see? This is typical behavior for a Z Patriot. Give us a visa, we want to come to you, it's beautiful there, it's festive, everything is clean, but actually we hate you really. If only we could bring Russia here too, but still we want to come to you. And if you don't give us a visa, then we'll come to you in tanks. That's the typical mindset of Z propagandists. They're not afraid to go to the den of non-traditional values, and many even buy real estate there. And this Sukhorukov, just to remind you, is the hero of the films Brother and Brother 2. That bald, disgusting guy who talked about Crimea, about Banderites and so on. He insulted every possible nationality and so on. That's real scum, that one. It's interesting, are they still showing those films Brother and Brother 2 in Russia now? The ones that used to be considered cult classics? Because those movies show the real attitude of Russians toward all other nationalities, where they insult absolutely everyone.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
People from the Caucasus, Ukrainians, Americans, everyone really, and they talk about the special mission of Russians in this world. Yeah, a special mission. Just look at what it is. To steal, to take, to threaten. That's probably their special mission. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. We're working here to expose lies and Russian propaganda. Sometimes it's not easy. I mean, the degree to which some people are soaked in Russian propaganda is honestly sometimes just astonishing. So subscribe and get your friends to subscribe too. There are also some really interesting facts here about the cooperation between the Maduro regime and the Kremlin. It turns out, guess who is leading the mission to train military personnel in Venezuela? In an interview, Russian General Kirill Budanov, who is the head of Ukrainian intelligence, said that Russia continues to maintain its military contingent in Latin America and is expanding its cooperation with Nicolas Maduro's regime. Right now, there are more than 100 Russian military instructors in Venezuela. They are led by Colonel General Oleg Makarevich. He is the commander of the so-called Equator operational group of the Russian Ministry of Defense. He is the one in charge of training Venezuelan security forces. First of all, Russia is now sharing its experience with its dictator partners on how to suppress protests. So this is most likely what awaits Maduro as well. Just as Russian specialists in protest suppression arrived in Belarus in 2020, the same thing is happening now with Maduro. Maduro is receiving assistance and his security forces are being prepared for a similar scenario. In addition, the head of Ukrainian intelligence says that they are acting as military advisors and instructors. This includes training infantry, special units, UAV operators, as well as work in intelligence and communications. This Makarevich himself, along with the main group of Russians, is based in Caracas. And during the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, this Makarevich commanded the Dnipro troop grouping. That is, it was he who organized the destruction of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant in June 2023. This crime caused a serious humanitarian, environmental, and economic catastrophe for Ukraine. At that time, the Russians were retreating across the Dnipro and needed to stop the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the south. And they simply blew up the Kakhovka dam, flooding territories, including areas where people lived. In this way, well, they're just classic monsters, really. At first, the Russians even bragged about it, telling stories about how clever they were, how they blew up the dam. Then they quickly started saying, no, it wasn't us, it was the Ukrainians who blew it up. At that time, the Russians had full control and were stationed on the dam. And the explosion happened from the inside. It required a serious amount of explosives to be planted there. In the end, it was proven that Russia did it. I don't know why they keep lying all the time. But by now, everyone knows you're monsters, that you're a blight. Why are you even trying to justify yourselves? That's it. Just admit it. Yes, we're monsters. We're absolutely despicable. So what do you expect from us? That would probably be easier, wouldn't it? And now here's a piece of news I just couldn't ignore. Yakutia. It turns out they've stopped payments to participants in the war in Ukraine because there's no money in the treasury. There's no money in the treasury. The money has run out for those fighting in the war against Ukraine. This was announced by the Republic's finance minister, whose last name is Alexeyev, and according to him, at the moment, there is no money. That's the situation we're in, the minister said. But let's rephrase this news a bit. Yakutia has stopped payments to participants in the war due to a lack of funds. Do you know how that sounds? Just so it's clear, Russia is really not one big multinational family at all. The diamond capital of Russia turned out to be a region that can't pay its own contract soldiers. The diamond capital of Russia. Yakutia is a region that provides Russia with more than 95% of Russia's diamonds. 80% of the gas in the east also comes from Yakutia. It's the key to the power of Siberia. This Chelyabinskoye field is the key to the power of Siberia. Vast reserves of gold, tin, rare earth metals, coal and oil. So it's one of the largest raw material donors in all of Russia, yet at the same time one of the poorest regions. It ranks among the top 5 most isolated regions. 80% of Yakutia's territory has no year-round roads. Well, why would you need them there? That's it. It's winter, there are no roads. Essentially, it's an oligarchic raw material colony within Russia itself. In other words, a single corporation controls everything there. Alrosa is that corporation. But now this is going to be a message to our Western, or rather mostly overseas partners. If sanctions on Russia are lifted and full-scale trade resumes, there will be enough payments for contractors in Yakutia with plenty to spare. The faster you lift sanctions on Russia, lift those sanctions and start trading, the faster Putin will assemble a new army for a new war. Here the dependence is linear, so if you want a new war, by all means, lift the sanctions. And now to one of the key news stories of this week. The leaders of the European Union have sent a working version of their proposals to Washington. This is the one that's an alternative to Trump's plan, or more precisely, they are trying to revise or cancel some points in the plan that the United States provided to Ukraine. Rubio and Witkoff will take part in the negotiations in Geneva today. Meanwhile, the European Union, Canada, and Japan have stated that Trump's plan for Ukraine in its current form cannot be accepted. So that's clear. Trump himself, by the way, was asked, "Is this the final version?" He said no. But then he said that if Zelensky doesn't accept it, then let him keep fighting, that's all. Well, of course. Well, as they put it diplomatically, it could serve as a basis, but it needs further work. And the most interesting thing is this news, which really says a lot. They say in the US Senate that this is a list of Russian wishes, not an American plan, but Marco Rubio denies this, publicly denies it, though not privately. I quote, "Secretary of State Marco Rubio contacted us by phone this afternoon. I think he made it absolutely clear that we are the recipients of the proposal that was passed on to one of our representatives. This is not our recommendation, this is not our peace plan," said Republican Senator Donald Trump's fellow party member Michael Rounds at the Security Forum in Halifax, which is in Canada. And Senator Angus King from Maine added that Marco Rubio called the plan a list of Russian wishes. It was not a plan of the US government. Both Rubio and his department, the State Department, commented on the senator's statements on social network X. Rubio wrote the following there. "The peace proposal was drafted by the United States. It serves as a solid basis for the current negotiations. It is based on proposals from the Russian side, but also on previous and current proposals from Ukraine." How interesting. Do you know what happened? Here's a classic. That very American diplomacy simply ran into chaos, backroom deals, some kind of personal envoys, replacing those who are inconvenient. So Kellogg, step aside. Driscoll, you go negotiate now. Witkoff went to meet Putin unprepared. No big deal. He misunderstood Putin. No big deal. Because of this misunderstanding, they organized a summit in Anchorage. No big deal, Witkoff. Just keep going. Marco Rubio is forced to balance between not angering his boss and somehow showing that the institutions still work, that they haven't been destroyed. There is some kind of path of the United States. There are some doctrines, there are some charters. All of this exists. Don't worry, this is the situation now. But things are getting more and more difficult for him. Because a note and a personal envoy now work instead of the entire State Department. Well, here are the very 3 points that Europe has already formulated for Trump's plan. This is what the Washington Post writes. So, in the document that the Europeans brought to the negotiations in Geneva, there are 3 main points. Point 1, there will be no restrictions imposed on the armed forces of Kiev, meaning no reductions by half or anything like that. Well, that makes sense. The aggressor doesn't reduce its armed forces, but the one being attacked is told, "Go ahead and cut yours in half, otherwise I can't defeat you." Well, that's just nonsense. Honestly, when people saw this point, did it not occur to anyone that something was off? Ukraine will once again regain control over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the Kakhovka dam. It will also receive unrestricted crossings over the Dnipro River and control over the Kinburn Spit. Well then, that's another point that's included. Other territorial disputes will be considered after the ceasefire according to the proposal. In other words, Ukraine does not withdraw its troops from Donbass for the sake of a ceasefire. But as we know, Russia does not want to agree to a ceasefire under any circumstances. So this point is clearly something Russia will not accept. In fact, they're now saying they haven't even seen this document. Although Dmitriev was scribbling it down on his knee and passing it to Witkoff. By the way, regarding the fact that Putin doesn't want to stop the fighting at all, not at all. And how does that line up with Donald Trump's statement that Putin wants peace? Trump says Putin wants peace. And Trump tells him, why don't you start by agreeing to a ceasefire? And Putin says no. So how does he want peace then? How does he want peace even when Donald Trump insisted on it? How can you claim to want peace if you don't even want to stop the shooting? Well, anyway, we all understand what's going on. Sometimes you look at these news stories, sometimes you hear these statements like, let Ukrainians go visit Russians and be friends and just forget about this war. Let them trade with them. When you hear this kind of thing from the vice president, sometimes it just feels like, where did the world go wrong? But friends, I want to tell you the following. I think the time has come in the world when good needs to come together and simply destroy all evil. In other words, good now needs to have fists, brass knuckles, baseball bats. Otherwise, evil in this world can't be defeated. And you, friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. And I really ask you, let's support our defenders, let's support Dasha, let's support her artillery brigade. It's very tough for them right now, and we can help them. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. Wishing us all a peaceful day and glory to Ukraine.